Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Our ongoing study in the book On Being a Christian by Professor Hans Kuhn, published in 1976. We're going to continue on in part 3. We're going to take a look at pages 236 to 255. And we're going to transition from miracles into the concrete cause of and for humanity. So how do we participate in God's will? What is God's will? And that becomes addressed in these pages, 236 to 255. Let's begin with block 1. And we read that miracles are considered ambiguous. Jesus says miracles were ambiguous, not always understood in their authority, sometimes worshipped, sometimes cursed. Miracle is not central in those narratives. It is the person of Christ. The miracles are only credible because of he who performs them, namely Christ. So miracles are linked to Christ's personhood. There are 3 possible interpretations, and they are all true to some degree. They are divine intervention, contrary to nature. They are divine incarnation, the fact that the Spirit of God is incarnate in all of nature, and they are charismatic deed united with Christ's word. That's the point being emphasized by the author. Charismatic deed united with Christ's word. So miracles as ambiguous and miracles linked to personhood equals miracles as charismatic deed and word. Jesus' word and deeds cannot be separated from his personhood. His miracles were always symbolic. Some of those symbols that emerged are bread of life, light of world, resurrection and life. Bread of life, after the feeding of the 5,000. After that miracle, we have the announcement by Christ himself. I am the bread of life. I am the bread come down from heaven. After the healing of the blind man, from Christ's own words, I am the light of the world. At the resurrection and raising up of Lazarus from the dead, Jesus proclaims, I am the resurrection and the life. So these symbols are even spoken directly by Christ, and those are 3 of those symbols that emerged. Therefore, note 4, deed and word joined to Christ's personhood. Jesus did not just talk, he intervened in the field of sickness and injustice with authority of word and charisma of healing. With authority of word and charisma of healing. Remember, whenever they responded to Jesus speaking in the synagogues, they always said, he speaks with such authority. No one has spoken in this way. He speaks with authority. He was preacher and healer. Therefore, we ask the question, what constitutes the supreme value, the supreme norm for Christianity? It is not natural law. It is not revealed law. It is not legalism of God's cause. Instead, Professor Kuhn tells us it is the Sermon on the Mount, period. The Sermon on the Mount is made up of the Logia revelatory sayings of Jesus Christ, what we later have called the Q document. They are drawn from there. Not a legal ethic. The message is that the relativizing of God's will is past. No longer will it be tolerated. What is required is purity of heart, pure interiority, to share in God's promise. We are not to weaken the unconditional will of God. Legalistic regulation is to be negated. The demand of God is decisive for the Christian life, for the believer. So we have to ask ourselves, and after start moving into the realm of the concrete now, because we want to discover this demand of God at the level of concretion. Let's go on to block 2 and take a look at understanding man's concrete cause. Man's cause and new birth. transformation takes place through the new birth of man. Think of Nicodemus there. Through man's surrender to God's will. Jesus expects a radically changed awareness, a new orientation in thought, a new orientation in action, a total orientation of life toward God. So man's cause is total orientation toward God, to give one's heart solely to God, awaiting God's rule. Awaiting God's rule. Becoming a discipleship in imitating Christ. Enacting metanoia, repentance. Remember, metanoia in the Greek means change of mind. It is not, as the Catholics first translated it, doing penance. It is not doing penance. It is repentance. Metanoia, repentance, change of mind. Therefore, Block 2, Note 3, the conclusive statement. New birth and orientation toward God equals metanoia, repentance. True change of mind, true change of life, true change of direction, true change of orientation. A decisive change of will, new attitude, new values. A returning on the part of man toward God, abandoning the problematic past, unreservedly turning toward God's future. Our future is recognized as being in God's future. So note 4, it's made possible by God's forgiveness and God's gospel in Jesus Christ. Living a life of trust and gratitude, we live a life of thankfulness. Reward and punishment are not our motives, but we have an awareness of responsibility, responding to Christ's call to joy, his Christ's call to joy. It is a call to responsibility. It is also a call to joy. It's a twofold call, a call to responsibility, a Christ's call to joy. And Professor Kuhn reminds us the Sermon on the Mount begins with a list of blessings. Therefore, now we can ask at the concrete level, what is the will of God? What is the concrete will of God that is calling us to the awareness of our responsibility? Let's move on to Block 3. All right, now Block 3, understanding God's will. First, it is understood as salvation. God wills man's well-being. He wills the salvation of all humanity, a will that is liberating. This is the meaning of God's absolute future. Its absolute future as liberation, something which is entirely new, and we have aspects of the new future. Man himself is at stake. We negate ritual correctitude. We affirm purity of heart. We negate asceticism. We affirm freedom concerning the Sabbath. Jesus challenged, Jesus shook the Jewish hierarchy. He relativized the legal system. He relativized the cultic ordinances for the Sabbath. Therefore, conclusion to this section, Block 3, Note 3, will as salvation and will as liberation equals will of God for the future eschaton. Man's humanity is demanded by the humanity of God in Jesus Christ. The combative element is essential to fully understanding Jesus. He combined unselfishness with aggressiveness. Therefore, praxis, concrete praxis, becomes our criterion of love. We go out of ourselves with this new understanding, of our cause being rooted in the future of God himself through Jesus Christ. Now, we go out of ourselves in concrete praxis as the criterion of love. Tremendous conclusion to this lesson. So let's do a quick recap here, because we're transitioning out of that charismatic section of Part 3 that dealt with miracles. So in Block 1, we had his conclusion concerning miracles. Block 1, Note 3, miracles as ambiguous and miracles linked to the personhood of Jesus Christ means that miracles are charismatic deed and word combined. Jesus' words, Jesus' deeds cannot be separated from his personhood. His miracles are always symbolic, and we have 3 examples. After the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. I am the bread of life come down from heaven. Remember the Capernaum sermon. After the healing of the blind man at the temple, Jesus proclaimed of himself, I am the light of the world. As the raising up of Lazarus from the dead, he tells Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus, in his own words, gives us the meaning of his healing miracles. They are signs of who he is. They speak as to who is Jesus as the Christ. They are signs of his messiahship, signs of his Son of Man authority. So Professor Kuhn closed out the section on miracles by saying that miracles are charismatic deed and word combined. You can't separate the word of Christ from the deed because it's a word proclaiming his Christological messianic authority. He is bread of life, light of world, resurrection and life. After concluding that section, Professor Kuhn wants to take us directly into the concrete realm of Christianity. What does it mean to concretely live as a Christian? Well, that means to live in God's future in Block 2. The conclusion there was in Note 3, new birth, being born from above. Remember the talk to Nicodemus, and our orientation toward God equals a life of metanoia repentance. Concretely, we live a life of metanoia repentance. We have a change of will. We have a change of attitude. We have a change of values. We have a return to God on our part. We abandon the past. We unreservedly turn toward God's future, toward the eschaton. Very much like Jürgen Moltmann there. So that gives us our summary of this transition into the concrete in Block 2. So we got our conclusion to miracles in Block 1. And we got our transition into the concrete realm as ongoing metanoia repentance. Ongoing metanoia repentance. Change of will, change of attitude, change of values, returning to the divine, rejecting, negating, abandoning our past, unreservedly turning toward God's future in a concrete way. Well, what does that mean to turn toward God's future in a concrete way? Then he took us on to Block 3. Concretely understanding God's will means concretely participating in the praxis of ministry. That means, again, the Greek concept praxis out of the New Testament means action and reflection within a particular concrete historical situation. Praxis in the Greek New Testament means emphatically action and reflection within a particular concrete historical situation. It's concrete metanoia repentance. It's concrete praxis ministry. It's concrete living according to God's will. And the conclusion there was 3:3. Man's humanity is demanded by the humanity of God through the revelation in Jesus Christ. The combative element is essential to fully understanding Jesus. He combined unselfishness with aggressive ministry. Therefore, praxis becomes the criterion of concrete agape self-giving. Praxis and agape self-sacrificial giving and love come together. That is the criterion of love, praxis. Going out of the self for others in ministry and reflecting on the will of God in the midst of ministry, and reflecting on the will of God in the return moment out of ministry. Tremendous helpful lesson that we've got here from Professor Kuhn, to have him conclude the section on miracles and then transition into the realm of concrete living of the Christian life. On being a Christian, what does it mean to be a Christian? A very large volume, but he has not watered down any content all the way up to page 255 now, and we've had solid content all the way. What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be living the Christian life? What does it mean to recognize the miracles as historically real in Jesus Christ? And coming out of that recognition of miracles, what does it mean to concretely live toward God's future? What does it mean to live out metanoia repentance? What is living out change of mind? Change of mind is not just internal. How do we live out change of mind, metanoia repentance? Then, how do we reach true liberation? We can't reach true liberation unless we go out of ourselves, out of that metanoia change of mind, into metanoia change of ministry, change of action. Metanoia has both interior aspects and exterior aspects. But we're not left alone. Professor Kuhn tells us that metanoia repentance means having a combative element in our life that says, yes, we will practice unselfishness, we will practice self-giving, but we will also be aggressive for actualizing God's kingdom in Jesus Christ. We will aggressively take up the criterion of love, which is praxis, ministry. We must not remain in the theoretical. We must go out of the self in the practical, in the concrete. Beautiful lesson. I am very impressed with this book. Professor Kuhn, we're already to page 255. We've had no weak sections in this book. Everything has been strong, concrete content. It's been a very substantial volume. That takes us up through 255. We're going to pick up next time on page 256.